Hello everyone, welcome to the third video about for loops. In this video we're going to talk in particular about what's called nested for loops. So this is when we have for loops kind of sitting inside of each other. So to start off the video, I want you to imagine what if we wanted to kind of code a matrix that went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the first row, then semicolon 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the second row, and finally 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 in the last row. So we can see here we have a 3 by 5 matrix, and it's fine. I can code something like this by hand, just typing in all of the numbers. But now imagine what if I wanted to update this to be a matrix with like 100 by 200 dimensions or something even larger, right? So all of a sudden it doesn't become so realistic now to just type these things out by hand. So today we're going to see how we can use for loops to kind of create this. But before we try that, one thing I want to show you is let's navigate over to the workspace. And we see here this 3 by 5 double. Double is just telling us what kind of number is stored in the matrix. But let's double click here. And we can see kind of how our matrix is indexed. And this is going to give us a little bit of a hint of how we're going to want to code it. So we can see here the position 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. Then we have 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and so on. So that's how we're going to refer to elements of our matrix. But now we need to see, well, what kind of pattern is between the columns. So for instance, to go from 1 to 6 is 5, from 6 to 11 is 5, from 2 to 7 is 5, so on and so forth. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is even though we're indexing by 1, 2, 3 along these rows, it's going to be a little bit easier for us to imagine instead that this is 0, 1, 2. If we do that, then notice this value 1 here. This is 0 times 5 plus 1. This is 0 times 5 plus 2. 0 times 5 plus 3. And at the very end, we can go all the way down and say 0 times 5 plus 5. Then if we imagine that this 2 is really a 1, then this 6, we can imagine it as 1 times 5 plus 1. Then 1 times 5 plus 2. 1 times 5 plus 3. 1 times 5 plus 4. 1 times 5 plus 5. So if that didn't make sense, don't worry. I'm going to show you an example of how we code it. And there's also going to be an iPad video where I kind of sketch out how we iterate through for loops by hand. So hopefully after you see those two examples, it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to close this variable explorer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new script. And oops, let me also close all of these. These are from the previous video I was filming. And I deleted all of the files, and now it's saying they're untitled. Anyway, good practice is we know we're going to be making a 3 by 5 matrix, so we're going to initialize it just to be a matrix that has size 3 by 5 and is filled up with zeros. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say for I equal to, let's go from 1 to 3. So this is going to be indexing the rows because we have 3 rows. So we go 1, 2, 3. Then for I, or sorry, not I, we should use a different variable. For j equal to 1 to 5, so this is indexing the columns. And now we need to say, well, what happens to the ij position? So our first guess might be to do something like 5 times I, so 5 times the index of the row, plus j, the index of the column. And then remember, we need 2 ends here to end our for loops. And oops, it's saying it might not be aligned. Let's see what's going on here. Oops. All right, here I made a little mistake here. So in Python, when you learn about for loops, we're going to have these colons at the end. Let me delete it, and we don't need that in MATLAB. All right, this is looking okay. Let's save this. I'm going to call this matrix script. And let's run it and see what happens. Whoops, wrong way. Let's run matrix underscore script. And we can see here that A becomes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up until 20. Notice I didn't put a semicolon inside of the for loop. So there's 15 entries here, and you can see how each one gets updated. So this is actually really cool. So see, first this entry gets updated, then this one. I'll show you how to iterate through for loops by hand again in the iPad video, but here's a good way of tracing through it yourself as well. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is notice that we really want A. Oops. I guess I have it here that's saved from the script. I just want us to remember that this really should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the issue here is that everything is off by 5. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where we really want to imagine that we're indexing the rows starting at 0. So the way we're going to fix this is we're going to say times I minus 1. Then we're going to save it. I'll put a semicolon. And let's go back and run it. And let's see, let's type out the result of A. We can see that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 15, just like we wanted. So if these seem a little bit strange at first, don't worry. I recommend trying out a couple examples on your own, and also be sure to check out the video where we iterate through these by hand. So maybe one other thing I want to emphasize is let's go back to our script. So just as important as being able to write these on your own is being able to look at somebody's code. So for instance, on a quiz, if I were to hand you this code and ask you, well, what's the output? That's something that you should be able to do. So that also goes back to iterating through it by hand, kind of looking at it and knowing what is it doing. So as always, let us know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.